On April 26, 1945, a German aircraft threaded through Soviet anti-aircraft fire and landed on a cratered avenue beside the Brandenburg Gate. The general flying it had been hit. The woman behind him reached over his shoulder and brought it down. She walked into the Führer bunker and stayed 3 days while Berlin collapsed around her. 32 years later, she was photographed at a US Air Force base wearing a diamond swastika brooch Hitler had given her. In February 1938, Berliners packed the Deutschlandhalle to watch a helicopter fly indoors. The pilot, 25 years old and not quite 5 feet tall, hovered the Fokker Achilles FA-61 between the rafters of the exhibition hall for 3 weeks of nightly demonstrations during the International Automobile Show. No one had ever flown a helicopter inside a building before. Hanna Reitsch had been flying for 6 years. Born on March 29, 1912 in Hirschberg, Silesia, now Jelenia Góra in Poland, she was the daughter of an ophthalmologist who wanted her to study medicine. She agreed, planning to become a flying missionary doctor in Africa, but in 1933 she left medical school at the invitation of glider pioneer Wolf Hirt. By the following year, on a research expedition to Argentina, she had become the first woman in the world to earn the Silver Sea gliding badge, and had already broken the women's gliding endurance record. Her rise was rapid. In 1935, she became a test pilot at the Deutsche Forschungsanstalt für Segelflug. 2 years later, Generaloberst Ernst Udet awarded her the title of Flugkapitän, the first woman ever to hold the rank, and posted her to the Luftwaffe Testing Center at Rechlin-Leertz. The FA-61 demonstrations followed. Reitsch was photogenic, articulate, and entirely fearless in the cockpit, and the regime put her image to work. She appeared in newsreels, magazines, and recruitment material throughout the late 1930s, never a party member but central to the public face of the new Luftwaffe. She tested the Junkers Ju-87 Stuka and the Dornier Do-17. On March 28, 1941, Hitler personally awarded her the Iron Cross Second Class. By 1942, she was flying the regime's most experimental designs, including the rocket-propelled Messerschmitt Me-163 Comet, an aircraft she once described as thundering through the skies sitting on a cannonball. Her one powered flight in it came in May. There would never be another. On October 30, 1942, on her 5th glide test flight in an Me-163B, the takeoff dolly failed to release. She tried positive and negative G-forces. Nothing worked. The aircraft came down at roughly 240 km per hour. She lost control on the final turn and the Comet crashed. Her skull fractured in multiple places. Her nose was crushed. Her jaw was driven out of alignment. Before losing consciousness, she insisted on writing her flight report. 5 months later, she walked out of the hospital. Hitler awarded her the Iron Cross First Class, one of only 3 German women to receive it. She had survived the most dangerous aircraft in the Luftwaffe. What she did next would put her at the center of one of the regime's last and most extreme programs. The Iron Cross First Class was almost never given to civilians and almost never given to women. Reitsch was the first of only 3 German women to receive it during the war, and she received it personally from Hitler. The decoration confirmed something she already believed about herself, that her flying mattered to the regime and that the regime mattered to Germany. From this point on, the line between the two would disappear. In February 1943, weeks after the surrender at Stalingrad, she accepted an invitation from Generaloberst Robert Ritter von Greim to tour the Eastern Front. For 3 weeks, she flew between Luftwaffe units in a Fieseler Storch, raising morale at a moment when morale was beginning to matter more than equipment. Greim, a World War I ace and one of Germany's most respected airmen, became a close personal friend. Their relationship would shape the last 2 years of her life. On February 28, 1944, Reitsch was summoned to Berchtesgaden to receive a personal commendation. She used the audience to propose something else. Germany, she told Hitler, needed a unit of pilots prepared to die in their aircraft, flying manned versions of the V-1 flying bomb directly into Allied warships and bridges. Hitler was unenthusiastic. Reitsch pressed. The result was the SS Selbststopfer Kommando Leonidas, formed under the command of SS Obersturmbannführer Otto Skorzeny. She was the first to volunteer. The aircraft was the Fieseler Fi-103R Reichenberg, a manned V-1 with a cockpit grafted onto the fuselage. 6 of its 7 test pilots were killed or seriously injured before Reitsch flew it. Her experience landing the Me-163 at extreme stall speeds let her bring the Reichenberg down at over 200 km an hour, where everyone before her had failed. The Luftwaffe High Command resisted the program. Hitler eventually agreed to its formation but never authorized an operational mission. The unit was disbanded in 1945, having flown no combat sorties. Her loyalty by this point extended beyond aviation. She held private discussions with Heinrich Himmler and described him afterwards as intelligent and rational. In October 1944, the test pilot Peter Riedel showed her a booklet documenting the camps. She refused to believe it, telling him it was Allied propaganda, and took the matter to Himmler personally. By her own later account, Himmler told her the truth would be the rope by which they would hang the regime if Germany lost the war. Reitsch chose to believe she had been told the truth. By April 1945, the regime was hours from the end. She was about to fly into the room where it would happen. On April 23, 1945, Hitler dismissed Hermann Göring as commander of the Luftwaffe over a telegram from Berchtesgaden that Hitler read as an attempt to seize power. Within hours, Grime was summoned from southern Germany to Berlin to take Göring's place. Reitsch, who had said her goodbyes to her family at Schloss Leopoldskron in Salzburg on the evening of April 25th, insisted on flying with him. The route into Berlin took them through some of the most dangerous airspace in Europe. From Munich, they were flown north to Rechlin, then west to Gatow Airfield in Berlin, with Reitsch riding in the tail compartment through an emergency opening. A fighter escort of roughly 40 aircraft covered the running. Several were shot down. The aircraft carrying Reitsch and Grime landed intact. For the final leg into central Berlin, Grime took the controls of a Fiesler Fi-156 Stork. Reitsch had already surveyed the route with Hitler's personal pilot Hans Bauer, who had identified the Charlottenburger Chaussee, the broad east-west avenue running through the Tiergarten, as an emergency airstrip. They lifted off from Gatow in the late afternoon. Soviet anti-aircraft fire caught them on the approach, and a round shattered Grime's right foot. He passed out at the controls. Reitsch reached over his shoulder, took the stick, and put the Stork down on the avenue, roughly 400 meters from the Brandenburg Gate. They reached the Führerbunker that evening. Hitler promoted Grime to General Field Marshal, the last German officer ever raised to the rank, and gave him command of a Luftwaffe that scarcely existed. Then he pressed a vial of cyanide into Reich's hand, with another for Grime. By her own account, she accepted it without hesitation, prepared to die in the bunker if ordered. They stayed for roughly 3 days. Reitsch later described Hitler as a man whose personality had completely disintegrated. She played with the Goebbels children in the corridors and pleaded to remain. Hitler refused, ordered Grime to leave Berlin and ensure that Heinrich Himmler was punished for his attempt to negotiate with the Allies, and sent them out into the city. Late on April 28, they took off in an Arado AR-96 trainer from the same improvised airstrip, climbing through fire from the Soviet Third Shock Army. They reached Karl Dönitz at Plön. They had carried 2 things out of the bunker, a poison capsule from Hitler's hand and a loyalty that no defeat would shake. On May 4, 1945, Reitsch was found at a hospital near Kitzbühel, Austria. The British test pilot Eric Brown, who had known her before the war, identified her and handed her into American custody. 20 days later, Grime took the cyanide capsule Hitler had given him and died in a Salzburg hospital cell. Days earlier, on the night of May 3rd, Reich's father had killed her mother, her sister Heidi, and Heidi's 3 children at the family's wartime refuge in Salzburg rather than face Soviet repatriation, then turned the weapon on himself. Reitsch was held and interrogated for roughly 18 months. The US Air Force intelligence report compiled on October 8, 1945, contains the lines that have followed her name ever since. Asked about being ordered out of the bunker, she said it was the blackest day when she could not die at her Führer's side. She described the bunker as the altar of the fatherland. In 1947, denazification authorities classified her as not affected, citing her lack of formal party membership, and released her. She moved to Frankfurt, returned to gliding, and in 1951 published her memoir, Fliegen, mein Leben. The English edition, The Sky, My Kingdom, followed in 1955. She finished 3rd at the 1952 World Gliding Championships in Spain. In 1959, Indian Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru invited her to establish a gliding center in New Delhi. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy received her at the White House. From 1962 to 66, she lived in Ghana, founding the first national gliding school at Afienya for Kwame Nkrumah. Surviving letters between Reitsch and Nkrumah are intimate in tone. The arrangement ended when he was deposed in February 1966. Her later life produced one irony after another. In the 1970s, she became an ambassador for the German section of Amnesty International. She tactfully avoided the 1972 Munich Olympics and never publicly commented on the murder of 11 Israeli athletes. At Edwards Air Force Base in California around 1977, observers recorded her wearing a diamond-set brooch with a swastika at its center, Hitler's gift, which she said she would wear for the rest of her life, though displaying it was illegal in Germany. Her last interview with the American photojournalist Ron Leitner in 1978 ended any remaining ambiguity. "I am not ashamed to say I believed in National Socialism," she told him. "Many Germans feel guilty about the war, but they don't explain the real guilt we share, that we lost." In August 1979, she wrote to Eric Brown, "It began in the bunker, there it shall end." Within weeks, she was dead. A heart attack in Frankfurt on August 24, 1979, aged 67. No autopsy was performed. The cyanide capsule Hitler had pressed into her hand 34 years earlier was never accounted for. Thanks for watching. If you found this video insightful, watch the deadliest German tank commander of World War II, Otto Carius, next. Like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell for more History Inside, and we'll see you in the next one.